Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's weekly watch list. Hopefully, you all had a wonderful weekend. Also, happy Memorial Day to all the people that have served or are serving at the moment. We greatly appreciate your sacrifice for our country. So, that being said, I will get into the breakdown of the overall market as a whole before getting into the 5 actual plays that I'm looking at for the upcoming week. So, if we look here on the ES and the daily time frame, we can see that this last week we finally did get a nice rally here on the market, making another bottom here as support now going forward. But what I'm keeping my eye on is that last time we got a short squeeze to the upside, we did get a nice push up into +2 ATR, and then we proceeded to continue to fall down to the downside. So I'm going to be kind of looking for that same situation to be happening here. Doesn't mean we have to go up and touch the +2 ATR, but I do still think that the path of least resistance here on the market is to the downside with its overall structure. If we look here in the squeeze, we can see that we are in a low compression squeeze. We're trying to get the histogram back above that 0, just like we kind of did back here when this short squeeze kind of fired to the upside. So definitely now look for this squeeze to maybe push it up to that +2 minus ATR or even this 50 simple moving average, and that could be a place where it kind of has some struggles to keep pushing to the upside, and it may start to roll back down as all those shorts have been squeezed out. So if we come to the weekly time frame here, this is why this pop really doesn't mean anything structurally wise or any different. We're still trading below that 21 weekly EMA. We're sitting right above the 8 EMA. We do still have this low compression squeeze. The bearish momentum is starting to get kind of eked out a little bit here, so we could easily get that reversion back up here to the mean, and if that does happen, I think that would be a great place to maybe start getting some shorts on the table, just due to the overall structure here still being quite bearish, because once you push down to those -2 levels, -2 ATR levels, as you have in the past here, you get that reversion before more selling can happen. So definitely going to be watching that level here quite closely this week to see if we can touch it. That would be an ideal place once again to add some shorts in my opinion. So that being said, I can go over the 5 plays that I am looking at for the upcoming week. The first one here is going to be at V to the downside. So you have this extremely crazy gap up here, and now we are kind of just slowly working our way back down to the downside. Eventually, I do think that this gap can get filled to the downside. It does not have to happen anytime soon. As you can see, it's kind of been moving slowly lower, but its structure overall is still looking more bearish than bullish, and with this large gap to the downside that needs to be filled, I think there is a likely chance we will continue to see ATV fall to the downside. So if we zoom in here a little bit, we can see that we have bearish momentum on the squeeze histogram with a nice daily squeeze setting up. Our price action is holding above the 21 EMA, but we aren't breaking out above this +1 ATR. We tried here, rejected it, and then I think that's a similar situation that's going to be happening here is we kind of try to push up a little bit, it'll reject that, and then we'll fall back down to the downside, hitting these -2 or even -3 ATR levels. Another thing to note is that we do not have stacked DMAs, and we're in a deceleration stage, so everything about this one structure is still looking quite bearish in my opinion, and I think that if the market does kind of find its top here with that short squeeze, this one easily could start to roll over to the downside. Next one here is Home Depot to the downside. Right now, it is trading above its 21 EMA, has not yet broke above the +1 ATR, and if it does, then this trade would not be valid any longer to the downside, but what I will be looking for here is a rejection of that level here come Tuesday, and then if that happens, that would be a good place, in my opinion, to short due to its structure being quite bearish. So we have negatively stacked DMAs, we're in a deceleration, it's in a very strong downtrend, so everything about this one is showing me that it wants to continue going to the downside. So just watch that +1 ATR level. If it breaks, don't enter the trade, no longer valid. If it rejects it, that could be a great place to start shorting Home Depot to the downside. Next one here is 3M to the downside as well. Kind of a similar story here as Home Depot, not all the way up to the +1, but it has continued to kind of reject that level here previously and not really doing a whole lot with it, having this long squeeze setting up here with a lot of just chop, chop, chop back and forth. So that being said, we do have a gap down here that needs to be filled in the daily time frame, so I do think it could easily come back down, fill that gap. If that happens, I'm going to expect this squeeze histogram to get more bearish momentum, and that could lead it right back down to these -2 or even -3 ATR levels on the daily time frame. And I'm also keeping my eye on the stacked DMAs here. We do have negatively stacked DMAs, but we have been consolidating for so long and so long here. So if you get that little break above the +1 ATR, once again, the trade is no longer valid. But I think if it can reject that level or just continue to fall below the 21, it will be a good trade to the downside. All right, next one here. The last two are trades actually to the upside. So the first one here we have Monster Beverage. We can see that its structure is in a nice uptrend here. We have positively stacked EMAs. We're in an acceleration stage as well. Great bullish momentum here on the daily squeeze. And our structure here is holding above the 21 EMA perfectly, and every time it touches it, it's been holding it really nice. Ideally, want to see this revert back either to the 8 EMA or even better, the 21 for an entry. But that does not have to happen because this one could just start pushing up higher. But if it does get that little fall back down to the 8 EMA, I think that will be a great place to enter trades here, as its structure is very bullish and it keeps continuing to push to the upside. Even when the market was selling off quite strongly, it held up very nice compared to it. And last but not least here, I have UNH to the upside, and this one isn't usually the structure I'll look to play, but the reason I like it is we do have the bullish momentum on the squeeze here. We're trading above the 21 EMA for 4 days in a row now, which is a nice sign. And we have a very large gap up here at around, what is that, 537 that needs to be filled eventually. So I think that this squeeze could propel it back up to that upside, fill that gap before it may start to roll over again. So that being said, if we can get another little fall down to that 21 EMA, I think that would be a great entry for this one. And I'd say play it a little farther out of expiration because it may take a second for this gap to get filled. But I do think eventually that this gap will start to get filled if this squeeze can fire to the upside and break out above that +1 ATR. So these are the 5 stocks I'm looking at for the upcoming week. Hopefully we'll all have a few other things you could add to your own watch list after seeing this. And let's go out there on Monday and start making some money, everybody.